Hi Spirit Fam, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be quite different, a lot different than what you're used to. Since I started this channel, I primarily wanted this channel to be about me sharing my knowledge, my wisdom, everything that I've learned throughout my entire 43 years to help humanity and help you grow and expand your awareness and your consciousness and just truly understand life at a much deeper level. And when I first started this channel, I, in all honesty, had no idea what it was going to contain, what I would provide. I just knew that the angels were going to provide me with the answers. They were going to provide me with the criteria that I would be posting. Today's video is going to be the story of my life. How you have come to know me as the spiritual advisor and the intuitive coach that I am, and all of the culmination of my life lessons that I've learned my entire life that truly brings me to the solution that we are far greater than we even believe ourselves to be. And I think a lot of times we look at life as we look at it very minimally. We don't truly look at it in its vastness and its expansiveness. And this is why I want to share my story. One of the things that the angels always told me was that I needed to share my story because someone out there would resonate with it and they would be able to attach themselves to it and understand that they're not alone and that they too would have something that they could talk to or talk about with someone else that would understand where they're coming from. And I know that a lot of times the messages that I share or that I provide sound harsh or they sound mean when they come across, but I'm saying them the way that the angels have guided me to say them. And I think a lot of times we need a little bit of that harshness. We need to be able to truly understand what it is they're trying to express to us or what they're trying to tell us. So today will be my story. So let's get into today's video. All right. I am going to try my best. I have notes right here in front of me. So if you see me looking down, if you hear things, it's because I'm looking at my notes and I have a lot to share. So I first want to say that I firmly believe that every lesson that we face in life challenges us to become the best version of who we are meant to become. I've always believed that God never puts things in our path that we are not capable of achieving or succeeding at. And I've always believed that sometimes it takes a little bit of work, it takes some strength, and it takes some perseverance to be able to push through some of our biggest obstacles in life. And I really honest and truthfully believe that everyone here has a purpose and has a mission in life. And our goal is truly to identify what that purpose or what that mission is. So by sharing my story today, I hope to be able to connect what my purpose and what my mission is with this channel and how we're going to move forward. in the upcoming year. So I was born on September 22nd, 1977. So I'm 43 years old. I was born in El Paso, Texas. And if you were to ask me today, I would always tell you that El Paso is my home. I love El Paso, and it has grown tremendously since I was last there. And I still have family that lives out there, so I go and I visit routinely. I am the oldest of 5, and I think sometimes people sometimes get confused. Like, they're like, really? You're the oldest of 5? I'm the oldest of 5. Now, I do want to let you know that, I was born, I have, a mother and a father, and they divorced when I was very young. I'm not really quite sure of when they actually got divorced. I just sort of feel that it was around the age of 6 or 7. And so after that, my mom soon became a single parent, and I lived with my mother. I can honestly tell you that I do not have many memories when I was younger. I mean, I've tried to sit and think back of memories back in El Paso, and I don't have many. I have very few. And the few that I have are just kind of odd and in between. We moved to Houston when I was 10 years old. My mom got a job offer out here. She wanted to be in a bigger city. She wanted to be able to earn a little bit more income. At that time, she had 4 kids to support. And so she wanted to sort of bring us up in a different culture, I guess, with diversity, to help us broaden our horizons a little bit. Now, I think one of the biggest questions I always get is, when did the angels first appear in my life? Well, I can honestly tell you that the angels have always been there. I have always had sort of these imaginary friends that I would talk to. I just never knew that they were angels, because they always appeared like normal human beings to me. And so they've always kind of been there. I've always had like these little voices that I would hear in my head. And it was just sort of a feeling. It was sort of a sense that I knew that it was, an angel, or that I knew it was some sort of a light being or a higher essence that was providing me with information, per se. So when we first moved to Houston, when I was about 10 years old, that was when I really noticed that my intuitive abilities started to grow and sort of expand. Now, I will tell you that when my mother moved us here to Houston, in the beginning, I was not the happiest person. I had a very loving and amazing relationship with my paternal grandmother. And I sort of was upset with my mother for bringing us to Houston and for sort of taking me away from my comfort and my environment that I loved. And the crazy thing is that, when my parents divorced, there were times when my mother tells me that we would spend time with my father, but I have no memories of that. I have memories of being with my grandmother and spending time with her in her home and truly enjoying her company and just being in her presence. But it was really never the memories of my father. Okay. Now, I say that when we moved to Houston, my intuitive abilities started becoming awakened, because that's when I truly started noticing different things. One of the things that I noticed the most was when we first moved to Houston. I remember I had this great sense and this ability that I could sort of view what was going on in a person's life when I concentrated on them. And what I mean by that is I remember sitting in my front yard watching our neighbor across the street shooting basketball hoops. And as I was just sitting there quiet and still, and I was observing him as he was shooting, I was sort of picking up on this sense of anxiety and sadness. What I knew was that I knew that those really weren't my feelings, because I was perfectly happy. I was just in a very calm state, just sort of watching this, watching him shoot basketball. And the feeling of sadness and anxiety became so overwhelming that I started to sort of tear up. And as I slowly started concentrating on that emotion, I was seeing sort of like these clips in my head of things that was going on in his home. And I was seeing images of like his mother and his father fighting, and then the word divorce kept coming up, like they were going to split up, and he was struggling with trying to figure out where he was going to live. And so that in and of itself frightened me. Now, one of the biggest conundrums is that my mother raised us up Catholic, and then when we moved to Houston, she converted us to Southern Baptist. I don't really like to classify myself as a religion. I'm more of a spiritual person. That is just my belief in how I feel now as an adult. But when I was a lot younger, I just did whatever my mother asked me to do. And when I was experiencing these type of intuitive abilities, and just truly like, I would always have a sense, I always knew when something was going to happen. I could always feel sort of a sense of something changing. When my mother was, I could always pick up on my mother's emotions all the time. And so this wasn't really something that I felt comfortable talking to my mother about, because in all honesty, I sort of feared my mother. She had these, we used to call it when we were kids, we used to call it if looks could kill kind of a look. And you never wanted to question her or disobey her. And so it just wasn't something that I was comfortable talking to her about. And in that moment, I truly felt alone, and I felt that there was something wrong with me. I felt that if I did say something, that they might take me to a bunch of doctors and they would say that I was crazy. So it was something that I just sort of kept to myself. And anytime I would have any kind of a vision of something or a dream about something, I would just sort of ignore it. And that's just sort of how I began my intuitive journey. I began just ignoring any kind of signs, any kind of nudges, gut feelings, anything that would come up. I would just sort of ignore it. So I'm going to tell you that I have 5 major lessons that I've learned in my life that and all of these lessons, I truly didn't discover them all and how they all interconnected, and they all roll up into one major life lesson. I didn't realize that until just this year, which is why I say that I truly feel that the experiences that we go through on a day-to-day basis in our life are truly meant to teach us something. They're meant to sort of broaden our awareness and sort of expand our consciousness into deeper understanding and deeper meaning. And I truly and honestly believe that we all come here for one specific purpose and lesson. We're all here to learn and to grow, but we're also here to sort of heal parts of ourselves to give us deeper meaning into the lesson, okay? My first lesson, I will tell you, began when I became more aware of it, was probably around the ages of 11 to 15. And that was just, I will tell you that all of these lessons, all 5 of these lessons, all stem around one major theme. And that major theme was a sense of abandonment and a sense of betrayal. I will tell you what the big super lesson is at the end, because I want to kind of save that bit. But my first lesson, I feel when I sort of became aware of it in doing a lot of my soul searching, was between the ages of 11 to 15. When we moved to Houston, I was devastated of leaving my father and leaving my grandmother. The crazy thing is that I don't have very many memories of my father, and I sort of felt like I was abandoned by him, because the moments that I did talk to him, it was never for very long. It was at the most for maybe like 10 minutes. And it was sort of like a rushed conversation. Like he wasn't really interested. And so I had the abandonment issue from my father. And I tried really hard for several years to kind of develop a relationship with him that truly was of no significant interest to him whatsoever. And I didn't realize that I was also emotionally abused by my mother. My mother being a single mother of 5 children, my mom and I always had our differences. We always had bouts of conflict, and we always bumped heads. I'm a Virgo with a Capricorn moon, and my mother is a Capricorn. So it's one of the reasons why we would bump heads a lot, because our moon in our astrological charts is truly the life lessons. It is the life lessons that we learn from a past life. And so it's one of the reasons why my mom and I bumped heads so much at a younger age, because my mother and I have a lot of very similar upbringing. And it wasn't until my later years that I was truly able to understand that and truly truly heal myself from that perspective. But we'll get into that later. So with this first lesson, it was, the abandonment from my father, emotional abuse from my mother. Being the oldest, I was responsible for all of the other little ones. I didn't really have much of a childhood. I had to grow up very quickly. I remember, discovering that, Santa Claus wasn't real when I had to help my mom wrap gifts on Christmas Eve for all of the other little kids. All of the other little kids came before I did. And I always felt like I was burdened with taking care of her children. But I loved my brothers and sisters. So it sort of came as a natural instinct to me to sort of motherly care for them. And it was just kind of one of those conflicting things where it's like, I sort of felt like I didn't really have much of a childhood, and I oftentimes blamed her for that, when in reality, it's really nobody's fault. You just have to kind of look at it for what it is and sort of move on. I also never really felt loved or wanted. And I think a lot of that stemmed from the abandonment that I felt, being abandoned and betrayed by my dad, because he never, I remember literally when I was younger saying, you never fought for me. And, he ended up remarrying, and it was just really difficult. Like, he never took the time, he never took the effort. And that was something that I truly struggled with. And this was when my vision or my perception of a male relationship, that's what truly triggered that, per se. Because I honestly feel that when a father, the type of relationship that a father has with their daughter truly helps their daughter grow up and develop positive relationships with other men or other masculine energies. I didn't really have very positive masculine energy role models in my life. And so because I didn't really have it, and because my mother was very controlling. She was very manipulative, and it was more about her way, and you had to do things her way. My mother radiated a very masculine energy, but it was a very controlling, manipulative masculine energy that I developed a very warped perception of masculine energy. And so and when you start at a very young age developing that kind of a perception of men, it's sort of all you really want is you just want to be loved. You just want to be cared for. You want to feel wanted. Okay. And so that was sort of my first lesson. My second lesson was between the ages of 15 and 17. And so we're going to just kind of stem this all together. So because I felt abandoned and betrayed by my father, and I didn't really have the love and support from a masculine energy, or I didn't feel loved. I didn't feel wanted. I sort of felt like people were just taking advantage of me when I was young. And at this point, I was already in high school. And high school is a very formative years for anyone when they're growing up. And so at this point, I ended up meeting someone who was 17 years old. I was 15. I was in the high school band. We were both in the high school band. And he sort of seemed very interested in me. So imagine being a young woman who isn't getting any kind of love or affection at home, isn't feeling wanted. And then all of a sudden in comes a boy, and he starts paying attention to her. This boy really paid attention to me. He really made me feel wanted. He listened. He did all of the right things. Let me just put it that way. He did all of the right things to sort of make me feel special. He made me feel wanted. He made me feel loved. He made me feel like, I think primarily it was just, he made me feel wanted. And I think, and because he was a masculine energy, I was just wanting more, and I was wanting more, and I was wanting more. And we ended up dating, and then we ended up getting into a relationship, and we were in a relationship for 2 years. And those 2 years were very rocky 2 years. He was already 17. I was 15. I was just a freshman in high school. He was a senior in high school. And he was very pushy. He was already sexually active, and he was very adamant about pushing me into sex, even though I was not particularly ready for it. And, you know, when you're that impressionable at such a young age, you sort of just give in to the pressure. And that's what ended up happening. And I ended up losing my virginity to him. And in that relationship, he was verbally, emotionally, sometimes he could be physically abusive. And it was just, he would just, you know, once he graduated, it was a constant fight with him. He was always picking fights with me. He was always, you know, making me feel guilty for spending time with my friends, even if they were guy friends, or making me feel guilty because he was insecure, but I didn't really see it that way. So he always, you know, would pick fights with me and tell me that I was cheating on him. He didn't want me talking to any other guys. He didn't want me having any friends with guys. And it was just kind of one of those things where I just felt like, you know, he was very, you know, talkative. Like he would point out, like, if he didn't like something I was wearing, if he didn't like certain makeup or a certain lipstick. Like, I literally remember one time when we had gone to eat breakfast at Denny's, and it was me and him and my mother, and we were sitting in the Denny's, and I was sitting next to him, and I remember him looking at me, and he looked at me and he says, "Take off your lipstick. It makes you look like a whore." And he said this in front of my mother. And I thought at that point that my mother was going to say something, and she didn't. And I felt so small at that moment that I did exactly what he told me to do. He was quite narcissistic, but I didn't see it at that time. In the midst of being in that relationship, I didn't see all of those signs. And then I was a junior in high school when we were still, together off and on, but he was constantly picking fights with me. And I remember it was towards the end of the year, and I had done so well in all of my studies that I was able to exempt out of my final exams. And I remember I had gone to his house because I was already done for the day, and it was the only time we were going to get to spend time with each other between his school and his work. And so I was able to leave school, and I went to his house. And when I got there, he was immediately pushing me into having sex. And it wasn't really something I never felt comfortable with it. Even from the start, it just wasn't something that I felt comfortable about, because it wasn't fun with him. It was just sort of rushed, and it just felt, the best way I could say it, something didn't feel right about it. And so I didn't want to pick a fight with him. And so I went ahead and I agreed. And then the moment he was done, he literally, I was laying in the bed, and he rolled over and he said, "I don't ever want to see you again. I think we should break up." I'm 17 years old, and I'd already been feeling like I'd been abandoned and betrayed by a masculine energy. And I never felt comfortable having any kind of sexual relations with this guy that I called my boyfriend. And he always forced himself on me, and oftentimes took what he wanted. And in this moment where I just didn't feel like fighting, and I just wanted to just sort of get it done and over with, and the moment he was done getting what he wanted out of the situation, he told me that he never wanted to see me again, and that he wanted to break up with me. Being 17 years old and being told that, I think in that moment my world shattered. I remember being so shocked and the tears falling from my face. And I remember getting up and going to the bathroom with my clothes and just looking at myself in the mirror and seeing myself so broken. Like, I can't even begin to tell you how broken I saw myself in that mirror. And I don't think I've even cried at telling this story until for years. But it's like I felt so betrayed, so abandoned at that point, that all I could see in the mirror was this little helpless girl sitting in the corner of a bathroom crying her eyes out, hoping that she was wrong at what she just heard. But I knew I wasn't wrong, because he was on the other side of the door banging, asking me to open up the door. I quickly got dressed. And as I walked out the door, as I walked out of the bathroom, I went into the kitchen, I grabbed my stuff, and he was looking at me and he was like, "You can't be surprised that this was coming. You had to have known this was happening, that this was coming." He's like, he was very rude, very cruel. The things that he said to me in that moment were just cruel. And I remember looking at him and asking him, "Is it someone else?" And he was like, "No, it's not someone else." But I knew it was, because I could tell that he was lying to me. My intuition was on very high alert at that point, because I had just been wounded beyond belief at that point. And I remember walking outside of his house and him looking at me, and he was like, "Oh, you'll get over it. Don't be so dramatic." And I couldn't believe it, how heartless and how callous and cruel he was. And I remember leaving his home and going straight back to the school and looking for my best friend at that point. And that is when I started to completely and utterly close myself off to any kind of masculine energy in my life. I literally closed myself off to men at that point, because I was so wounded. It took me an entire year to get over it, literally to get over it. And I don't even think in that year I completely got over it. I never told anybody what really happened. I kept that secret with me for 10 years. I never told a soul what happened, not even my mother. There were people in my life who knew that I was hurting somehow, some way. They knew that there was something wrong with me, but they never pried. They never asked questions. They never asked. I sort of kept it all to myself. After that, I went off to college, and I was only there for about a year and a half. And I came back because I was severely depressed. I ended up coming back home. I stayed with my mom for a little bit, and I remember getting a temporary job and being completely and utterly miserable. I was very good at faking. I was very good at putting on a smile on my face, on portraying myself to be extremely and utterly happy, but yet deep down inside, I was this broken down little girl that was literally dying inside. And I never told a soul. I was so depressed and so down that I contemplated taking my life, because I didn't feel that anybody could help me. I felt so alone at that point. So alone. My mom and I were constantly fighting. We were always at each other's throats. At this point, my mother had already remarried, and I was just miserable. I was making my own friends miserable. I was not happy. And I remember coming home from work one day, and I remember as I was on my way home, I remember literally sitting down thinking about how I was going to end my life. And when I got home, my baby sister had come into the room. She'd come into my room, and she sat down on my bed, and she looked at me and she said, "I feel like you're going to leave." And I said, "Why do you say that?" She says, "I don't know. I just feel like you're going to leave." She says, "And I want you to know that if you leave, I'm going to miss you." It was in that moment that I knew that God had sent an angel through my sister to truly wake me up and to see that even though I felt like my world was collapsing, I was still making some form of a difference in someone's life. And I remember that evening just praying and asking God to help me. And it was in that moment that I said, "I don't understand what it is you're telling me." I said, "But I'm here and I'm going to listen." And then I ended up getting my own apartment. And as I got my own apartment, I started, you know, really living for myself for the first time. My best friend and I became like inseparable. We did everything together. We would go out, we would hang out, we would go to movies, we would go out to dinner. We talked every night on the phone. She and I were completely inseparable. And the crazy thing is that I, you know, despite myself closing off to men and not really wanting to go out with men, I still had a lot of guy friends. I would go out on a date, but I would always keep people at arm's length. I would never let them get any and closer. Like I would keep them at an arm's length and say, okay, that's as far as I'm letting you in, because I was so afraid of being wounded again or being abandoned and betrayed. I always told myself that I would never give my heart fully and completely to anyone. And so I never let people get very far. Like I had a couple of guys that were interested, and I didn't want it. I was just like, nope, you know, no thanks. You know, I'm perfectly fine. I don't need you. I don't need love. Love doesn't exist. I'm done. I'm no, you know. And, you know, my best friend, you know, she and I were best friends in high school, and we did everything together. And the crazy thing is I never saw her as one of the girls. I always saw her as one of the guys, because to me, she felt like she was a dude. She always felt like she was a masculine energy. And I think it's one of the reasons why I felt so comfortable around her, because I had a lot of guy friends and I felt comfortable around them. But again, I always kept people at an arm's length, like at a distance. But I slowly but surely started letting her in little by little by little. And then we ended up falling in love. If you ask me, I don't even know how that happened. It just happened. But I'm not going to go deeply into that story, because that's going to be another story. But my next lesson came when she and I, my best friend and I, fell in love. And I came out to my family, and I told my family that I was in a relationship with my best friend, who happened to be a woman. And this is when I can honestly tell you that my life completely and utterly changed. My mother, being a very godly woman and very religious, was not happy about this. And she was not accepting of it. We went through several different stages where she was like, you know, I don't agree with this. This is, you know, she kind of made it feel like this was something that I was doing to her. Like, how could you do this to me? And I knew that it was always because she was afraid of what people would think of her and how she raised us. And I could never understand that, you know, and all I ever wanted was for her to accept me. And so that was a very big struggle. And it got to the point that she eventually gave me an ultimatum where I had to choose. I had to choose either my family, or I had to choose my best friend, who I loved and loved me. And because I chose my best friend, because it's what made me happy, and I just wanted my mom to be happy for me, she disowned me. Being the oldest of 5 and sort of looking after my siblings and viewing them as my own children, that was devastating and crushing to me. She completely turned them all against me. I had no contact with any of them for 2 years. And I really felt like my world was falling apart. And this again was the second time that I contemplated taking my life. it was that moment when I really asked myself, I didn't think that I was strong enough to handle the pain that I was feeling. And again, I was feeling that I was being abandoned and betrayed by my family. And the biggest struggle that I had there was that I always believed that your family is supposed to love you unconditionally and would never do something like that. I just had that belief, and I couldn't understand it, and I couldn't grasp it. And I struggled with that. And it was at that moment, in my weakest and in my lowest point ever, feeling so alone, so abandoned, and so betrayed, that my spiritual journey began. That's when I really started calling in the angels of love. And I started, anytime that I felt so alone and I felt like I was just, like I couldn't breathe because I just felt so abandoned, I would call on the angels of love. And that is when my journey with the angels truly began, where I really started using them to help me get through those hard times, those times of self-doubt. The reconciliation between me and my mother didn't really happen until about my 30s, almost. And we have an amazing relationship now, a beautiful, amazing, loving relationship now. We understand each other, but we know that we have boundaries with each other, and we hold true to those boundaries. But for me, the biggest thing about that lesson was that I truly started utilizing my intuitive abilities and communicating with the angels at that time during that whole ordeal. And then by calling in the angels of love and truly utilizing the angels on a day-to-day basis, and truly like playing with my intuitive abilities, I ended up finding a mentor who sort of kind of took me under her wing and sort of helped me develop my intuition and develop my abilities. And it was when I started truly beginning to love life. I started truly like recognizing that I wanted to help other people, that I felt that I had a purpose to help other people, to guide other people, to help them heal and move past certain barriers that they might be facing. And one of my biggest discoveries was that, because I would always say in that whole ordeal was that, why can't my mother just accept me? And it was, I realized that I didn't accept me. I hadn't accepted myself how I was. I somehow felt that I was flawed in some way. And it was because it was a perception or a belief that I had that, that made me feel that way. But it was a belief and a perception that was sort of imparted on me based off of how I grew up and how I was led to believe. And so I had to sort of break down all of those, limiting beliefs or perceptions that were imposed on me through my growing up, that I had to sort of break that down. And in, developing my intuition and truly like growing into my own, into who I was becoming, it allowed me to sort of become a little bit stronger, become a little bit more independent, and to truly see myself as an individual. And I started sort of realizing that I was in control of my own life, and that I could lead the life that I wanted to lead as long as I believed in myself. So I started developing my own confidence in truly honoring myself and my own worth and my own value. And it was at this point that I ended up meeting someone else in my life, another male masculine energy in my life, that literally blew me away. When I first met this individual, because I was so in tune with my intuition, and because I I really was in tune psychically and intuitively the moment I saw him and the moment our eyes met. I knew, because I literally remember this day like it was yesterday. I remember looking at him, seeing him, and as we both sort of saw each other, in my mind I thought, shit, you're gonna change my life forever. I knew that. I knew that almost instantly. We developed a great friendship, and in that friendship we sort of I sort of intuitively knew that we were soulmates. What I didn't know was that we were karmic soulmates, because he taught me a very big lesson. I now know that he came into my life at a point in my life where I had to learn to choose myself over everybody else. I had to stop people pleasing because he was a soulmate. He reflected all of the things, all of the good things and all of the bad things. And it was like when things were good between us, they were good. But when they were bad, they were bad. Like so bad. It was like World War III, and it was awful. We were mean to each other. We were, it was like brother and sister fighting all the time. And it was just sort of a very chaotic type of relationship. But I had no idea that it was a karmic relationship and that we were in each other's life to teach each other something. Ultimately, the biggest lesson that I had to learn from this individual was that I had to stop giving of myself so much that I didn't put enough value in myself. I let people walk all over me. I did this in my job. I did this with people around me. I gave and I gave and I gave and I gave and I gave to the point that I had nothing left to give to anybody else. I would literally drain myself to the point that I sort of had this belief that if I continued to give, they would just love me and they would want me and they would treat me so much better. And it was in this relationship that I had to sort of learn to stand up for myself. I had to learn to demand respect, and I had to learn that I deserved better. And, in those bad moments that he and I had, I would always say, you need to learn to treat me better. But I would never walk away. I would never walk away. And it finally got so bad to the point that I finally said, I'm done. And I completely cut everything off. I walked away from the relationship. I said, I'm done. And I walked away. I cut the ties. I cut the cords, and things have never been the same since. And I didn't really realize the full significance of that relationship until lesson number 5 came in. So lesson number 5 happened around my 40s up until now. It actually occurred in the year of 2019, to be exact. It's when it sort of came to a head. It was when I discovered that I was sexually abused as a child by multiple people. And it's the reason why I have no memories as a child, being back home in El Paso. And there's a reason why I have a memory gap. When people, those people that are the closest to me, I've always told them I have a memory gap between the ages of 5 and 10. I have no memories. I could literally, if I'm with my family or I'm with my mom and she brings up something from that time and she says, remember this. And I'm like, no, everything is just blank. At this point in my life, I was doing a direct sales business. I also had a full-time job and I had a direct sales business. And so again, I was giving and I was giving and I was giving and I was giving to other people, but I was never really giving to myself. And the angels would always tell me, you know, you need to take time for yourself. You need to take time for yourself. You need to take time for yourself. Well, I always would put myself on the back burner. I would never take care of myself, to the point that I would make myself sick. I'd end up in the hospital. I was a people pleaser to the T. I would please people. I would go out of my way to make them happy, even if it meant my own sacrifice, my own happiness. And that's literally how I did things. And so it got to the point where I was already like 2 years into this direct sales business, and I was doing extremely well. I was doing extremely well. I was very good at it. I was very successful, but I was getting tired. I was getting so tired. I remember being in Las Vegas, where I had accomplished a specific goal that I had set for myself with this direct sales business. And I had achieved it. And this was supposed to be like one of the greatest achievements of my life that I was so excited about. And I was miserable. The entire trip, I was miserable. I was so tired, so exhausted. My body just finally gave out. And I remember coming back home after that trip. I remember it was in March of 2019. And I remember, you know, my best friend, who is now my wife and I being at home, and we were laying in the bed and we started being a little intimate. And it was like all of a sudden I had this flashback, and I flashed back to a time when I was maybe around the ages of 6 or 7, and I was in this house, and I could smell the smell of the room. I could literally see the entire layout of the bedroom to the T. And I'm laying in the bed. And as I'm laying in the bed, I am terrified. I'm literally terrified. And I'm literally sitting there, and it's like I'm anticipating. The anxiety and the tension is so gut-wrenching, because I just know that someone is going to walk through that door, and it's not what I'm like. I'm dreading that moment. And in that exact moment, I see the doorknob turn. And as the doorknob turns and the door opens, in walks this shadow that I can't really see. I can't see the person's face. I can sort of see the outline of the person. He closes the door, and it's a he, because he says, "You're going to be a good girl for me, right?" And he gets on the bed and he starts pulling the covers. And as he's pulling the covers down, I literally freeze up. And as I lay there frozen, I can feel his large hands go all the way up my legs to my tiny little underwear. And I feel them slowly sliding down my legs. And as I feel them come off, and I feel him sort of position himself, in my tiniest voice imaginable, I say, "Let me see your face." It was in that moment when I said, "Let me see your face," that I sort of snapped back to it. And my wife looked at me, and her eyes were huge, and she's got these beautiful blue-green eyes. And when I looked at her, she said, "Are you okay?" And when I saw her eyes, I immediately broke down crying. I was so shaken and so disturbed by that vision in my mind. And I just kept contemplating, like, was this real? Did this really happen? Like, I couldn't wrap my head around it. Here I was, 40-something years old, and I had this vision of myself as a young girl, having this horrible experience, feeling that tension and that anxiety and that, like, I couldn't put my head around it. I couldn't grasp it. And I felt like I was going crazy. And I remember just crying, and I just remember rocking back and forth, just constantly rocking back and forth, telling myself, I'm going crazy, I'm going crazy, I'm going crazy. And it was after that I started having small little flashbacks from my past. It took me, I literally broke down. Like, I had to take time off of work. I had to find a therapist that I trusted, that I felt comfortable with, because I honestly felt like I was going crazy. And I remember sitting in the therapist office. I remember looking at her and telling her, I think I'm going crazy. I don't know why I'm having these visions. I have no memories from this age to this age, but here I am having this vision. And that's when she told me, she says, you're remembering. And she's like, and you're not crazy. And I was out. I literally took time off for about 2 months to truly allow myself the time to heal. I went to therapy. I did so much soul searching at that point that I didn't realize a lot of things. Like, I literally went through a dark night of the soul where I felt so alone. Like, in the midst of going through all of that, like all of those memories coming back to me, and just sort of, I didn't feel the angels with me. I would call out to them, and I felt so alone. I literally felt so abandoned and so betrayed at that point. And I felt like I can't possibly be going through this all by myself. And I'm telling you this because every lesson, every experience that you go through, every person in your life, everything is meant to teach you something. It's meant to help you become the person you are truly meant to become. Once I finished my therapy, the angels slowly started coming back. And I remember it was Archangel Metatron that stepped up first. And he said, your time of rest is over. The world needs you. They need to hear your story. So that is why I'm here. It is why I've learned everything up until now, because I have things that I can share with you. I have knowledge, I have experience in helping you look at these lessons that you've gone through in your life to help you grow, to help you love yourself, to help you forgive, to help you move forward, to help you see it, no matter how hard it might be, to see it as a blessing in disguise in some form or fashion. My biggest lesson were all of these small little lessons. I look at them as small little lessons, all roll up into one big thing. And that big thing is truly discovering who I am. Truly understanding my true essence. I am who I say I am. My lessons, my experiences do not define me. They help me build character. They help me become the better version of who I am meant to become. So this is what I wanted to share with you all. If you have listened through this whole thing, I thank you all so much for joining me today. Thank you for listening. I am Eileen. I am your spiritual advisor, your intuitive angel guide, and your coach. And I am here to help serve you and help you heal, grow, and expand your consciousness and your awareness into the best version of yourself. Namaste, guys.